Welcome to our podcast discussion. Let's delve into the Forced Labor Convention, 1930. It's a foundational document in international labor law.
I'm excited to unpack this convention. So, can you start by giving an overview of what this convention is about?
Sure. So, essentially, the Forced Labor Convention, 1930, is an international agreement that obliges ratifying states to take steps to suppress all forms of forced or compulsory labor as soon as possible. It mandates
Yeah.
that these practices, which by definition involve work extracted under threat, be completely eradicated.
Right. It's really about eliminating labor done against one's will.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that the provision initially had what we call transitional provisions. These allowed, under very specific circumstances, temporary forms of forced or compulsory labor, as laid out in Article 1, paragraphs 2 and 3, and Articles 3 to 24. But over time, even the ILO and related supervisory bodies recognized these were outdated.
So, they were eventually removed, right?
Yep, definitely. In 2014, the International Labour Conference adopted a protocol that explicitly provided for the deletion of those transitional provisions. That change was notably significant because it meant no exceptions, no grey areas where forced labor could be tolerated.
That's a pretty drastic shift, isn't it? Just to go from a conditional approach to a zero tolerance stance?
It is. It's like a clean slate approach. By removing the outdated transitional clauses, the Convention firmly anchors the notion that forced labor is unacceptable in all circumstances, save for the narrow exclusions detailed later on in the text.
Right. Speaking of exclusions, what kind of work or service does the convention say isn't considered forced labor?
Great question. So, there's a nuanced breakdown in Article 2. Forced or compulsory labor is defined as any work or service exacted under the threat of penalty that isn't voluntarily offered. However, it intentionally excludes a number of instances. For example, it doesn't cover work required by compulsory military service laws when it's purely military, civic obligations in a self-governing country, penal or correctional labor when it's supervised by a public authority, and work done in emergency situations like war, natural disasters, or epidemics. It also leaves out what it describes as minor communal services.
That seems reasonable, though some might argue that exceptions for emergencies could be exploited. What do you think about that?
That's a good point. I mean, it's a bit of a balancing act, right? On one hand, you have the need to maintain human rights standards, but on the other, states have to respond to real emergencies. The Convention tries to strike a balance, allowing for necessary actions in crises while still aiming to eliminate exploitation.
Yeah, I get that. And how about the practical enforcement of these standards? I mean, what's in the convention about penalties?
Well, Article 25 specifically deals with that. It declares that the illegal exaction of forced or compulsory labor is punishable as a criminal offense. It further obliges each ratifying member to ensure that these penalties are not only established, but also strictly enforced.
Right, enforcement is key. Enforcement always seems to be the tricky part, doesn't it? Different countries have varying capacities to enforce labor laws.
Absolutely, and that's where things like Article 26 come in. It outlines how a state should extend the Convention's reach to territories under its control, even if those territories have different legal systems. It even allows for modifications if necessary, but these modifications have to be clearly stated when the state ratifies the Convention.
Very detailed. So, in essence, if a country wants to ratify, they need to declare exactly how they're applying these rules domestically.
Precisely. And let's not forget the ratification process itself. Articles 27 through 29 cover the formalities. States must register their ratifications with the Director General of the ILO, and the Convention only becomes binding on a country once its ratification is registered and the specified time period has elapsed, usually about 12 months.
Right, yep. That also connects to the idea of denouncing the convention, doesn't it? How does that work?
Yes, indeed. Article 30 lays down the terms for denunciation. A country can denounce the convention after 10 years from when it first comes into force for that country. But if they don't act after that, they're then bound for additional 5-year periods, with denunciation possible at the end of each period. It's like a renewal cycle in international agreements.
It does sound like a built-in mechanism to ensure ongoing commitment while still offering exit routes if needed.
Exactly, it's almost like a self evolving contract. The convention also considers revisions. Article 31 mentions that the ILO governing body will periodically report on the convention's functioning and propose revisions if necessary. Then, according to Article 32, if a new revised convention is adopted and a country ratifies it, it automatically leads to the denunciation
Yeah,
of the
that
older
makes sense.
version.
That sounds efficient, although I might argue that automatically switching over to a new convention might be a bit too abrupt for some states.
I see your point. The ipso jure denunciation upon ratification of a new convention could potentially catch some countries off guard if they're not fully prepared for the new regulatory regime. It's a respectful challenge to that mechanism, ensuring that while progress is made, it doesn't lead to unintended disruptions at the national level.
Yes, I agree. It's definitely a tricky balance, promoting progress while ensuring stability.
Exactly, and that's part of the broader theme here how international labor standards evolve over time. The Forced Labor Convention stands as a testament to the ongoing effort to protect human rights globally.
Absolutely. How do you think the deletion of the transitional provisions in 2014 impacted the credibility of the convention overall?
Oh, it was quite significant. Removing those transitional provisions, which essentially allowed forced labor under specified conditions, helped to reinforce the idea that no, there should be no compromise on forced labor. It sent a strong message that forced labor is indefensible under any
Right,
circumstances.
that's a clear stance. It's almost like a global ethical checkpoint, isn't it? For countries to reassure themselves and others that they're committed to modern labor rights.
Exactly. It's like a reassertion of core principles. And the convention also provides for translations into multiple languages French, Spanish, Arabic, and so on, so that the text is accessible to a wider audience. This demonstrates the ILO's commitment to inclusivity and global
Yeah,
dialogue.
making it more accessible is definitely important. Speaking of inclusivity, does the convention allow any kind of flexibility for member states? You touched on some of that earlier with Article 26, right?
Yes, it does. While the fundamental aim is to completely abolish forced labor, the Convention acknowledges the diverse legal frameworks around the world. Members can declare how they apply the provisions, whether fully or with specific modifications. This approach respects national diversity while upholding international standards.
That approach seems a bit like tailoring a suit. It's all about fitting the international standards to the local context.
Exactly, it's like a bespoke design for labor laws. Even though the principles remain the same, the implementation might differ slightly to account for local legal and political realities.
Right, exactly. And in practice, how effective do you think these conventions have been in eradicating forced labor globally?
Well, it's a mixed bag. On one hand, the convention has raised awareness and established a clear international standard. On the other, enforcement remains a challenge in many regions due to corruption, limited resources, or conflicting national interests. But the moral and
Yeah,
legal
it really is a
framework it
crucial legal
provides is
backbone.
indispensable.
It's interesting how something drafted in 1930 still drives policy debates nowadays.
Absolutely, it shows the enduring nature of international human rights law. Even with the ongoing challenges, the Forced Labor Convention, 1930, continues to serve as a reference point, reminding us that forced labor in any form is fundamentally incompatible with human dignity.
Yeah, for sure. This discussion really underscores not just the legal aspects, but the ethical imperative behind the convention. Thanks for this insightful chat.
My pleasure. It's been a thoughtful exchange on how a nearly century old document remains vital today.